Welcome to this latest edition of the Ril Dil Podcast. I'm your host, Will Gerald Quinn, recording on a Sunday. Hope everybody out there is enjoying their weekend. You had a lot going on over the past couple of days in the world of sports, but we're going to begin with the NBA Finals, which seemingly will end tomorrow night as the Denver Nuggets have taken complete control of these NBA Finals with back-to-back wins in Miami. Both impressive for various reasons. Listen, when a team they're doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing. Denver is clearly a better team than Miami. They have the best player by far. They've had the best two players in this series by far. So we're going to look back on this series and we're going to say, yeah, it probably should have been a 5-game series. Now, again, I understand I picked Miami in 7. Denver in 7. I never picked Miami to win this series. Picked Denver in 7. But Denver is clearly a superior team, and they have done it with their defense. The last 2 games, Denver in this series, Denver has held Miami to a 102 offensive rating in the wins, in those 3 wins. That, if you want to know, what that means, that would rank probably number 1. They would be number 1 in defensive rate. They would be number 1 in defensive rating if they held their opponents to that same particular rating. So a 102 offensive rating for Miami. Miami's offensive rating in the playoffs was 115. Like, Miami was making shots against everybody. They were playing just great, shooting the lights out, scoring at will against everybody else, not against the Denver Nuggets. And I think as you watch, we go back to Game 4. Game 4, you have a game in where Djokovic and Murray were pedestrian. I'm not going to say they were bad, because Murray, despite the fact that Murray shot was only 5 for 16 from the field, he did have 12 assists and no turnovers. So we can't take away that fact. But the bottom line is, Joker had 5 fouls, was in foul trouble, had 5 fouls, missed about 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. And again, Murray shot 5 of 16, but despite that, Denver won the minutes that Joker was sitting. The minutes that Joker was sitting was on the bench. Denver was +4 in those minutes, and the number one reasons for that was obviously you had two great performances by Aaron Gordon and Bruce Brown, who combined for 48 points. Aaron Gordon goes for 27, 7, and 6, and he has been great in this series from game 1 on, even in the games where his impact on the type of stuff that he's doing defensively. And there are things that he's doing that just don't go in the stat sheet. As far as defensive rotations, his, cut to the basket, they're just little subtle things that he's been doing throughout the course of this series. I can make a case that, he's been as good as Jimmy Butler in this series, to be honest with you. I know Jimmy Butler's going to have the numbers as far as scoring wise, but that's because he takes more shots. But as far as impact on the game, outside of Jokic and Murray, I think Aaron Gordon has had the biggest impact of any player in this series. Up until this point, and he was spectacular on Friday. 11 for 15 from the field. Again, the 7 assists, the 7 rebounds, the 6 assists. He was just all over the place, and frankly, along with Bruce Brown, was the difference in the game. Listen, Denver, if Denver's going to play defense the way they've played defense, and Miami's not going to knock down 3-point shots, then there's no way Miami could sniff the Nuggets. We've been saying throughout the course of this series that Miami had to shoot the basketball at a high clip, especially from the 3-point line. They had to shoot the basketball. shoot the ball well. Miami had another bad 3-point shooting game, 8 for 25. Denver went 14 for 28. Denver would in the last two quarters, in the last two games in the third quarter, Denver has outscored Miami 60 to 42. The third quarter in these last two games have in essence decided the game. Remember, you go back to game 3, they outscored them 29-20, and then this game it was 31-22. And both in this game, the lead was only a 4-point lead at the half for for Denver. Where they again, and then that went to 13 in the fourth quarter, and then the game was basically. I know Miami tried to make a slight comeback a little bit in the fourth quarter, but that game was really never in doubt. Miami has led only 9 minutes in the last two games. I repeat, Miami in the last two games has only led 9 minutes and 47 seconds in the last two games. So Denver goes in winning to Miami. And again, we've been going over the Denver Nugget championship checkpoints over the course of the playoffs, and they have covered or checked off every one of those checkpoints. They had a bad game 2. We're gonna see how they're gonna respond in game 3. They win game 3. They have a game 3. They get greedy. And take game 4. So they have without question showed championship medal, and and I would be borderline shocked if they were not crowned tomorrow night back at home in game 5. There's nothing that I've seen from Miami in these past two games that would tell me that they can come back, that they can prove about coming back and win the series, but that they can even get this series back to Miami. Jimmy Butler has been decent in this series. I'm not saying he's been bad, but he's been okay in this series. The Miami role players have cooled off significantly from the conference finals. Caleb Martin has been basically a non-factor. Vincent they've calmed him down after the first two games. He was the first two games in the series he shot the lights out, and the last two games he's been horrible the last two games in this series. So, Denver has done what very good teams done. I'm not gonna say they're a great team, but what championship teams done. They're gonna take away those role players. Like Jimmy may get his points, Bam may get his points a little bit, but outside of that, they're going to take away his role play. They're going to take away your role players, like those guys, the Vincents of the world, the Caleb Martins of the world. Those guys that were undrafted, they're not beating a championship caliber team. They're just not. And the bottom line to me is, you have a Denver team that, again, when you have two guys that are at the level of Djokovic and Jamal Murray, everything else is easy. Like if you notice in the game 4, Miami was pressuring Murray in the backcourt. They were going out their way with blitzes and double teams, and that led what happens when you over pursue or when you overcompensate, when you try to put that much attention on those two guys, there are going to be some openings for cutters and jump shooters. And you got to give Denver a lot of credit for not settling for 3-point shots. Like Denver is not jacking 3-pointers. Denver shot 28 3-pointers. They made 14 of them. They had a number of excellent looks. What you saw out of Denver is you saw Aaron Gordon, you saw Michael Porter, you saw those guys cutting to the basket and taking advantage of Miami overplaying and giving the extra attention, and rightfully so, to a Jamal Murray, to a Djokovic. So you can't take away everything. Like if they're gonna if the other teams role players are gonna make shots, or if they're gonna cut to the basket, do those little things, then you're gonna lose, because Miami just does not have the offensive firepower to keep up with Denver. They just don't. And by the way, I think the Miami defense hasn't. I think Miami defensively has played relatively well. Like Denver has a high offensive rating. They've been extremely efficient in terms of shooting, but they haven't shot the lights out from 3-point range. And to me, if you hold Denver under 110 points, you've done your job. Like Denver can put 120 or 130 on you in a blink of an eye. And I think Miami has held Denver has not. Miami has held Denver relative in terms of point total. They've held them. Then they've held them somewhat in check, somewhat. But the problem is Denver can beat you in so many ways. They don't have to shoot threes. And that's the thing. That is a lesson that should be learned once the series is done. If you're a team, you're trying to build a team to win a championship, use the three as a means to get the best shot. Okay? Like Golden State are masters of it. We're masters of it. Using the three to get cuts, to get layups and what have you. Denver does that as well. They use the use the 3-point shot as a means to get better shots. They're not 3-point happy. They're not going to sit up there and jack 40 or 50 threes and keep shooting threes until they make them. No. They are perfectly comfortable with taking shots inside the paint, going to the basket. And they're not a team that gets to the line a lot. They're just not. But what they are is they know they get great shots. No team in the league gets better shots than Denver. So I think teams in the offseason, especially if they're a contending team, you want to look at a offensive philosophy. Again, you may not have the personnel to copy. No one has a joker on their team. Okay, no one has that type of player on their team. He's just the most unique player in the league right now. But if you have talented players, you have all NBA caliber players. There's no reason why you shouldn't be. If you have multiple all-stars on your team, why you can't get great shots. Boston Celtics with Tatum and Brown, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to get great high quality shots and wide open shots. None. So I think that's the lesson to be learned here is you don't fall in love like this. Use the 3-pointer as a means to get a great shot, to get great shots. I was thinking about something, Murray and Djokovic did not have great games in game 4, right? They're coming off the game, and I'm not. You can't. I don't think we can be necessarily shocked. They put a lot into that game 3. They played both of them played heavy minutes, and I really think Denver felt like the kill shot was game 3. Like if we can punch them in the mouth in game 3, game 4 will take care of itself. And you saw the rotations, you saw them playing. You saw Murray and Djokovic not resting at times when they normally rest in that game 3. So maybe the energy wasn't quite there in game 4. Maybe they didn't have enough zip, coming off, a situation where you're going from Wednesday to Friday. So they didn't have great games. They didn't have vintage game 4s. But when you look at the totality of their postseason and the level that they're playing at as a twosome, and how the natural chemistry that they have between the two of them, how well they play off each other, you're very hard pressed in the last, say, 25 to 30 years to find a playoff twosome playing at the same level. And I went back and I looked now again. I went post Chicago Bulls because I think Jordan and Pippen. No one played. There was not a better duo in the playoffs in the postseason than, to me, Jordan and Pippen. You can go check the 1991 postseason where Pippen is basically like 21, 9, and 6 and smothering defense. And Jordan is like 31, 8, and 6, something like that. Both of them were over 50% from the field. Jordan was a little better on the 3-point from the 3-point line at about 38%. And both of them, again, mind you, they're playing, all NBA type and Jordan playing MVP level offense, Pippen playing All NBA, All Star type level offense with smothering defense. Okay, they were, at that point, 1991. These were probably the two best perimeter defenders, defensive players in basketball. This is before Gary Payton emerged a couple years later and would kind of take that mantle as being the best perimeter defensive player in basketball and would win, defensive player of the year in '96. This is before Pippen, before Payton's emergence. Those were the two best perimeter defensive players. So I'm putting them aside. So I'm going to go from the 2000s on, and again, I'm going off guys playing off each other as well, not just sheer numbers. 01 Kobe and Shaq. This is when the Lakers went 15-1, ran through the playoffs, swept everybody except the Sixers, went through four 50-win teams. This is when the West was ridiculous. Like the West, you had 50-win teams as 8 seeds in the Western Conference. Shaq was 30-15, 3 assists, 2.4 blocks. Kobe was at 28.5, 6 rebounds and 5 assists on 46, 30, 85 splits. And you remember they went through a lot during that regular season with the whole Kobe shooting too much. This is when Kobe was really coming into his own as a scorer. This is when he had to start having 50-point games that 2000-2001 season. And Shaq was, annoyed by him. They went through their whole rift in the regular season, and then playoffs they connected and just ran through everybody. And both of them were playing all-world defense during that playoff run. Like both of them were at a All NBA defense count. They played the Lakers defense that 2001. That doesn't get talked about. No, the Lakers defense was all-time great in those playoffs in 2001. But this is peak prime Kobe and Shaq as a twosome. Not the best that we saw of Kobe, but the best that we saw Kobe play along playoff Shaq. They were on another level. So they were the best combination that I've seen post Jordan and Pippen. Then I had Curry, Durant in 2017. Of course, they were 16-1 that year. Caught a couple breaks, caught a break with maybe Kawhi Leonard getting hurt, but I don't think they would have lost that series. Durant was 28.5, 28.5 points per game, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 55, 44, 89 splits. Curry was 28.1, 6 rebounds, close to 7 assists, 48, 41, and 90. Now, I would put them a notch below Kobe and Shaq from the standpoint of Durant and Curry did not play off each other. They were just that talented. Now they fit, but they did not play off each other. And mind you, you had 2 other All-Stars you had Klay Thompson and also Draymond Green. So Golden State was not as dependent on those two as the Lakers were on Kobe and Shaq, or Denver is with Djokovic and Murray. Everything plays off Djokovic and Murray. Everything. Everything runs off those two. Period. So I would say Murray, if I were ranking them since 2000 or so, I would go Kobe and Shaq. I would go Joker and Murray would be second, to be honest with you. I would go Joker and Murray. A couple of people I thought about, Wade and LeBron. Wade would at that point, Wade was starting to fall off. Who else? No one ever approached Tim Duncan. We love Ginobili, we love Parker, but Duncan was on his own level with that team. Like no one ever, there was no combination. Even that first year they won a championship with Robinson. Robinson was very good, but he was starting to be in decline. That was about Duncan carried that team. They had great role players, but no one ever played off Duncan at this level. It was basically Tim Duncan, and then they had a bunch of, and then Parker and Ginobili fit in well with him, and they had a great. There was no 2-man game with San Antonio. It was more of a collective in terms of the collective effort, in terms of ball movement and things, or Tim Duncan post ups. But there wasn't like they didn't run like a 2-man game to that level. Again, we already talked about Wade and LeBron. Durant and Curry didn't play off each other, but that's just about it. That's about it in terms of dominant 2-man groups, 2-man duos in the playoffs. What Djokovic and Murray are doing right now, it's just something like we will appreciate it more once the finals are over, or once we have some more perspective, maybe a couple of years. But the level they're playing at, the level they're playing at right now is a all-time great level as a duo. And the reason why they're so lethal is, from an offensive standpoint, there's nothing they can't do. Shooting, passing, putting the ball, creating for others. Jokic posting up, like Murray with the shot making. Like you have no answers for them defensively. Because of how versatile they are from an offensive standpoint. Like you can't, there's just nothing you could do with them per se. And again, I'll be interested to see how teams try to defend them after the season moving forward. Because right now there's no blueprint. There's no, okay, we can do this. And Miami has thrown everything at them. When I mean everything, they've thrown like traps, blitzes, backcourt, like doubling off the ball. Like they've done, when I mean they've thrown everything at them, Spoelstra has emptied the chamber. That's why I don't see any adjustments that Miami can make, right, as of right now. I just don't see any more adjustments that could be made. What Miami needs Jimmy Butler to be Milwaukee Jimmy Butler. And I heard this point brought up a couple of days ago. Jimmy Butler has not been the same player since he tweaked his ankle against the Knicks in game 1 of that series. Remember, he tweaked his ankle in game 1 of that series, sat out game 2, came back and did enough, but because of how great their role players played, they didn't need him to be dominant. And again, even in the Boston series, he had had a great game 1, pretty good game 2, but the Caleb Martins of the world, Duncan Robinsons, they're role Players. And Bam, that's when Bam Adebayo started playing at a high level. Their other players played at such a level, and the Celtics were so inconsistent that they didn't need Jimmy Butler to be dominant like he was in the Milwaukee series. So Miami needs Milwaukee Jimmy Butler to have a chance to stretch this back to a possible 6 game. As of right now, Jokic leads all NBA playoff players in points, rebounds, assists, and win shares. If that holds up, which I don't see any reason why it won't, he will be the first player ever to lead all players in total in the totals in all those categories. So that is how dominant that he's been over the course of this postseason. I don't see this series returning back to Miami. There's nothing. I'm not saying Miami's going to quit, because they won't. They'll play hard for a half. It'll be a close game for a half, possibly. But Denver can smell it. I don't see Denver letting up. Denver has shown you that they have not played with any games in the playoffs, especially in the last 2 series. Like, even in the Phoenix series, it took Durant, when they were up 2-0, it took Durant and Devin Booker basically playing just lights out, shooting, scoring like 70, 60, 70, 80 points for them to tie that series. And then they they ran away with the rest of that series. And even against the Lakers, when they had opportunities to kind of like relax, they, swept the Lakers. So Denver has shown, their maturity as a team that is going to be, your 2023 NBA champions in about 24 hours or so. We're going to do a deep dive on the PGA. Again, I don't talk a lot of golf on this podcast, definitely not as much as I used to. Occasionally we'll touch on the majors and the Masters, on the majors, especially on the majors occasionally. But you had last week, the PGA merged with LIV. We know LIV is a $1 billion is being funded by the Saudis and their, and their billions of dollars that the Saudis have and they were paying all these players like Brooks Koepka and Phil Mickelson, they all hundreds of millions of dollars to play in that tournament, which kind of put the PGA in a spot where, they were, PGA in a kind of tricky spot and basically forced the PGA to up the ante as far as tournament purses and what have you. And it got to a point to where the PGA could no longer afford to compete with LIV in terms of court costs and resources and what have you. Jay Monahan basically came out and said as much, and they, basically gave in to LIV, and now basically LIV in essence owns the PGA. I mean, that's all there is to it. Now, I want to say that this is an example to me, and you can call it greed, you can call it lack of morale, you can call it money over morality. You can call it what you want, but the PGA to me has no one to blame but themselves, because this does not happen if the players don't agree to it. Like if you didn't have any of the top players taking those large purses from LIV and saying, "Hey, we're gonna play on it, we're gonna play on this tour versus the PGA tour," then LIV just has a bunch of. Then those guys just have billions with nothing to spend on. Not nothing to spend on, but with no PGA to spend it on. Okay. This happened because the PGA, for years upon years, got caught with their pants down, and they got caught. They got fat and happy. They got content with just tradition. They did not see the world the way the world is moving right now. And the way the world is moving is progression and evolution. Evolution is undefeated. And when you have a sport like golf, which is driven by the players, you have to take care of the players. You have to. Now, the NBA has gone almost too far as far as taking care of the players. They have to scale back just a smidge in order for the overall, for the overall wealth of the game. Just a smidge, not too much. But the PGA was so arrogant and so poorly ran that they didn't see. For whatever reason, players were annoyed. Enough players were annoyed to basically they would just compromise any morals or compromise any, like they would just go to the highest bidder and be like, hey, you know what? Fuck y'all. I'm going to take my $80 million or my $100 million and keep it moving. I don't care about your tradition. I don't. And by the way, if enough top 50, top 10 guys go, you will have no choice but to eventually give in, which the PGA Tour did. And enough top 10 guys went along with LIV to really put the heat on the PGA Tour. But I believe that this could have been prevented if the PGA took care of the players. But what I mean by taking care of the players is actually going to the players and saying, what do you need? Like, how can we grow this game? How can we make the game better? Because there were certain PGA players who were with this. Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, they said those guys said, hey, we're good. We're fine. They made a ton of money, but they were loyal to the PGA. But the problem is, listen, you could talk about how Saudi Arabia and the whole idea of, 9/11, the whole idea of their treatment of women. None of those things are good. Are good. And from a moral standpoint, you can understand why people chose not to take the money and stick with PGA. But here's the problem: when you're under an organization that's treating you like shit, it's much easier to take that $100 million or $80 million or go or you're versus much easier when you're under, and that's what happened with the PGA. The PGA just took their players for granted and just thought that, hey, we don't have to think, we don't have to be innovative. We don't have to um, really grow the game. We don't, we could just be the PGA and that's enough. And it's not. In sports, listen, you can in sports, remember, you are fighting for attention in sports, the sports culture. And let's be honest, again, I respect how many talented players there are in golf right now. Golf is loaded with young talent, but the casual fan ain't fucking with golf. Minus Tiger when Tiger Woods is not if Tiger Woods is not contending, and Tiger Woods hasn't been contending seriously for the better part of outside of one major win in 2019, he hasn't been contending for about the better part of almost a decade now. If we keep it real, or close to it, or close to like 6 or 7 years now. So the casual fan is not fucking with golf like that. It's just not. So they have to fight. If you're golf, you have to get creative. You have to get innovative. You have to think outside the box if you want that. If you want that viewer or want that fan, you have to. It's not just enough having, a bunch of talented players, a bunch of young talented players in it between 25 and 35. That's not enough. This is not. From that standpoint, the on the course product is great in golf. But again, you're going against a generation that likes things moving fast. Like the 25-year-old, 30-year-old, for the most part, is not watching golf. So you have to find ways to getting back to the players, but you have to find ways to appease your players, so your players can sell the sport. That's one of the problems with golf and tennis. And I'll get to tennis later. They don't really know how. They have not found that happy spot in terms of how to market their sport, especially to millennials and about Gen Zs, to millennials and even people my age, to a lesser extent. Most of golf's audience is an older audience. Like the majority of golf's audience is going to be 40 or 50 and up, to be honest with you. But the problem is your top players are in their mid 20s to mid 30s. And the PGA did not do a good job, did a poor job at taking care of those guys. That's all there is to it. Now, could this have happened anyway, possibly, with just how much money was being thrown at players? Sure. But the PGA had no chance, with considering how poorly they treated their players. This was going to happen. And by the way, the PGA, one of the things that made, I look at the NBA, right? Pete Rozelle, the late Pete Rozelle, was a visionary because he saw what the television could do to the NFL product. He saw what the television could do to the NFL product. Once that marriage was made, the NFL, it never looked back. The NFL became the number one sports product in the world. Once that marriage was made. David Stern saw with the Dream Team sending the American players over, it wasn't just about we were getting our ass kicked. We got our ass kicked by Russia that one time and lost the bronze medal. No, it was bigger than that. David Stern wanted to grow the game globally. So, yeah, send Jordan, Magic, Bird over, and the game hasn't looked back since from a global standpoint. That spawned the Dirk Nowitzkis, these foreign players that became great players. Who saw all those players at the Dream Team in '92, Ginobili's and what have you, those guys. That's playing chess, not checkers. That's being a visionary. Tennis and golf don't. The leadership in tennis and golf is just piss poor. And I'll explain to you why later on with tennis, how much they've wasted just an era of icons. So Listen, I think that this is not. I honestly believe that this will be. Um, I think this will be good for golf. Because number one, we're talking about golf, and I think eventually, I think it's going to force golf to, it's going to force golf to kind of like change some things and try to be more creative as far as how they grow their game, how they market their game. I really do. I think this merger, at the end of the day, I think this merger will be great. Will be great for the game of golf. Whether regardless of what the players think about it from the standpoint of the guys who didn't want to be a part of the merger. In terms of real thoughts, Novak Djokovic won his 23rd major earlier in the French Open. Is his third French Open. I think if you the breakdown, he has three French Opens, three U.S. Opens, like seven Wimbledons, and 10 Australian Opens. So at the age of 36, he's still the top guy in the sport. Um, when it's all said and done, it's going to be hard pressed not to call him the greatest tennis player of all time, considering he's going to have, not only does he have the record in terms of Grand Slams, but in terms of year number one, weeks at number one. And the bottom line is he's done this in an era. He did this in what we noticed to be as the golden era of tennis. He did it in the era with Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal, who have between those two have 42 majors, 20 for Federer and 22 for Nadal, and he has done this again. We're talking about a guy who, remember, the first 6 years of his career, he only won one major from '05 to 2011 to the beginning of 2011, because that's 2011. That was his first big year when he won 3 out of 4 majors. He had one major during that time span, '05 to '10. He has won 22 majors from 2011 up to this point, and there's still 2 more majors left in the season. He's won 22 majors. And the thing I respect about Djokovic is just the mental toughness. Like, he kept adding to his game, and we've seen him come back from 2 sets down in major finals. Seen him come back against Federer a couple times in major finals. He's never out of a match in a major, and he kept adding to his game. There was a time where his serve was the weak. His ground game is the best as ever. That he's the best hitting from the baseline. He has the best return serve ever, and he's no one is better from the baseline ever than him. But his serve has become a strength. Like, that's actually become a strength now. And he kept adding to his game, and he took those early hits from Nadal, Federer, and he's going to turn out to be better than both of them. And that's the thing. He's going to turn out to be better than both of them. If I were ranking them, I would rank Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. I have Federer over Nadal because I think Federer was dominant at more surfaces than Nadal. Nadal, out of his 22 majors, he has like 14 at one place. It was the French Open. Doesn't have enough at the other places for him to be considered better than Federer. Even though he had a winning record against Federer, I understand that. But I think Federer all around has a better all around game and was better, is more dominant on different surfaces than Rafael Nadal was. But that's neither here nor there. So you think about this, right? With the era of tennis, they've had men's tennis in particular. They've had three. We've seen since 2001. That's when Federer came about. Federer won his. Let's say, all right, let's go from 2003. Federer, out of those three, was the first to win a major. 2003 at Wimbledon. So 2003 up until this point, 2023. This has been a 20-year reign for those three guys. 20 years of dominating the sport. The three greatest players of all time. Djokovic, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, however you want to put those guys in order. Despite this, the sport of tennis as a whole, especially in terms of the men's, has not grown whatsoever. Like, how many people outside the tennis fan, the tennis person, actually cared about Djokovic breaking this record? I mean, people I would be curious, watch this. Now, you could say, well, part of the reason is that neither one of those guys are American. That's part of it. That's a very easy excuse. I think I again, and I'll connect this with golf. Just tennis has just done a piss poor job of promoting and marketing their sport. And part of it, and they don't treat their players well. As they don't treat their players well, to be honest with you. Think about how many. Think about when I look like. Think about this: Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal basically played in the same era. They're like, there's no other sport in history where you can make it, where you can say the three greatest players played against each other in the same era. It just doesn't happen. Like Jordan didn't play against LeBron. You had Wilt and Russell. That's as close as that we came in basketball. Well, you have two. All right, we Wilt and Russell, Magic, and Bird. Tennis, they've had three guys who are iconic players play in the same era. And again, I ask the question: how has that benefited the sport? There's no superstars coming down the pike. People are barely watching the sport, barely watch the sport. So again, that to me, you look at the leadership um, of tennis doesn't even have a commissioner. That's problem number one. Golf has one that might as well not have a commissioner because their commissioners haven't been worth 2 cents. But it is remarkable to think that you can have a sport, you could be blessed as a sport to have these three iconic players and really almost nothing to show for it as far as popularity and growth of the sport. So like it's almost impossible to fathom that. Like look at what Magic and Bird did for the NBA and how that spawned the era of television. And then you have Jordan, and then Jordan does what he does, and then you have even following Jordan. Yeah, the NBA had to tweak some things with the style of play, but that the stars did not stop. You have Shaq would come along, Kobe, LeBron, Kevin Durant, those guys, and so on and so on. And with tennis, one of the reasons why Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer were able to win so many Grand Slams after the age of 30 was there hasn't been any younger guys that have come along that have pushed them out. This tells me that a lot, whether it's in America or all over the world, they're not getting the top athletes. They're not getting some of the great athletes to come play their sport. They're those guys in Europe, in America, they're either going to football, basketball. Overseas, they're playing soccer. The best athletes are playing soccer, not playing tennis. They're playing soccer. Or even golf, for that matter. There's probably more top European golfers than there are tennis players right now. So to me, I look at Djokovic's, great accomplishment, and Djokovic is not only one of the greatest tennis players, he's one of the greatest athletes. I mean, he's going to be in that list as one of the greatest athletes, most accomplished athletes of all time. He has to be in that conversation. He just does. Consistency, standing the test of time. When it's all said and done, he could end up with 25, 27, who knows how many majors he can end up with, because there's no one right now that can seemingly stop him when he's playing well. Also think about what is tennis going to look like when Nadal is on his way out. Like I can see Nadal retiring at the end of this year. What is that going to look like when all three of those guys are gone? What the future of tennis is going to look like? And you're going to have no Williams sisters as well. like tennis is almost going to seemingly be obsolete, to be honest with you. So if you got to be very concerned. Tennis should be concerned about their future moving forward, because they have wasted, in essence, 20 years with three of the greatest players of all time, and really, again, next to nothing to show for it. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Ril Dil Podcast. I will see you in a couple of days with probably more than likely a recap of the NBA Finals, and also my end of the season top 5 players list. That and a lot more. Have a great rest of your evening. So long.